Thank you very much. It's a real pleasure to be here. My name is Daniel Roe, and I'm going to be talking about modern development with Nuxt, which I very much hope is what the slide behind me says. But if you want to, by the way, feel free to come to the front and fill in the space if that would help. I'll be doing a little bit of live coding later on. So I want to talk about a number of things. But first, I thought I'd give you a quick intro to some of the things I do or am involved with. So Nuxt is the main thing I do. I'm a full-time open source maintainer. I'm sponsored, so I'm not employed by a company. I do this because I love it. I also contribute to some other projects as well, things like Fontaine, which helps reduce cumulative layout shift with web fonts. Magic regex, which aims to make regular expressions type-safe in JavaScript and TypeScript, and is compiled away at build time. So you write normal, regular expressions, basically. I have a website, roe.dev. I'm on the core team of a Mastodon client called Elk. I'll show you a bit of the code base a bit later on, but Mastodon is a decentralized social network, like Twitter, but power to the people. And a few other things there as well. Probably more important, do check them out, by the way. First Commit and PageSpeed are quite fun, tiny little projects. This is my cat, Barley. I live in Edinburgh, in the UK, and most of my work is hindered to some degree by Barley. She is not very tolerant of me doing other things that do not involve stroking her, petting her, or otherwise tending to her every whim and need. And so I'm talking about Nuxt, and I'm aware I'm sort of going on the assumption that you know what that is. But I'm also not assuming that you do. So would you mind letting me know? So if you scan a QR code, it should hopefully work. So this does rely on internet access. I've got a WebSocket server that's connected to my laptop with a slide deck. And hopefully when you all scan the QR code, it should submit a little API request. This whole thing, by the way, is like 5 lines of code. It's not complicated. It uses something called PartyKit, which has just been bought by Cloudflare. It's a great little project. Do check it out if you don't know it already. By the way, have you noticed how clever I am? Because I've labeled this yes and not yet. So little subliminal clues like that are going to sort of filter through. You're going to go home and think, I would like to try Nuxt. I don't exactly know why. There was something about that slide. But this is great. So you've not used Nuxt. That's fantastic. I'm going to say a little bit about what it is. So Nuxt is a framework for building full-stack web applications. So that's focusing on the server side and the client as well. So for client-side interactivity, it uses a framework called Vue. And for server-side, it uses something called Nitro, which is actually a framework we built for Nuxt 3, but we've open-sourced it separately as part of an organization on GitHub called unjs, which exists to make unified and universal JavaScript solutions for an entire ecosystem. Solutions that run anywhere and can be reused by lots and lots of different frameworks and use cases. So Nitro is now the foundation of a framework called Analog, which is an Angular meta framework, as well as Solid Start, which is a framework using Solid as the front-end library. And I would love to see that grow to more. Part of the core philosophy of Nuxt, and I'll be talking a lot about philosophy later on, is that it's zero config to start with, but it can be made your own as you go. That matters a lot to me because I'm the kind of person who customizes everything about my computer from the terminal to VS Code. And if you're like that, then you'll like Nuxt because you can customize it all. And here's a little timeline. So the first Nuxt commit was a few days after, I think, the release of Next.js, which is a similar framework for React. Testing. Oh, okay. Is that any better? Is it more authoritative? Okay, well, maybe not. And it's grown since then. The most significant entry here is the beginning of work on version 3. Because please don't ever do this. What we decided to do with Nuxt version 3 was rewrite the framework from scratch. Why did we do it? It's a very good thing that we did that, but don't ever do it. We had a lot of breaking changes in the ecosystem. There was Vue 3, which is a huge breaking change. Webpack 5 came out, PostCSS 8 came out, all the things that we had built Nuxt 2 on. And each one sort of came out in a delayed fashion, meaning we had to continually rebuild everything. But it actually ended up forcing us to make it to build Nuxt 3 in a modular way, which I'm going to talk a little bit. So I keep on telling you what I'm going to talk about. I promise I will actually talk about it at some point. But it forced us to build things in a modular way so that hopefully we'll never have to do this again. And this is a little snapshot of Nuxt. I never exactly know what these numbers will say because I built, this is live, it's just pulling it from GitHub. So we're sort of 50,000 stars and 29 million downloads. And 63% of downloads are on the new Nuxt 3. And that's a little graph of the sort of download count of Nuxt 3. And this is much more important than those numbers because who cares about NPM downloads and stars? These are the people who've contributed to Nuxt. So there are over 690 as of today. And Nuxt is very much a framework which is driven by the community because it's not backed by a VC company. It's an independent open source framework that anyone can be involved in. You don't have to have permission to build a feature or fix a bug. It is open. And that's how I got involved in Nuxt from the beginning. I now lead the core team, but a few years ago I was contributing because I had a company, we used Nuxt, and I wanted to see the fixes we were making go back upstream to benefit other people too. Right? That's the beauty of open source. So here are the things that I think I want to pull out about modern web development that matter to me, that matter to Nuxt, and I think also will make a difference whatever framework you're using. So first of all, agnostic. I think this is both a really good thing and a terrible, terrible thing, right? It's the midwit meme, or it's something that every new developer does. If you're anything like me, you start by abstracting everything away, right? You need to write one function to do something, and you start thinking, you know what would make this one function better? If it could be used in every possible way at any point in time. And then you make a little sort of reusable function which is fully customizable, and like premature abstraction is a terrible thing. And so one of the things you see, of course, is that as you become a better developer, you stop doing it. And you start having a sort of waterfall type process that you start by just writing the function. And then the second time you write the function again, but maybe a little bit different. And then the third time you start thinking, okay, now I think maybe we could abstract this. But I think for a framework, it's really important that actually those abstractions are there. So abstractions for as much as we possibly can create. So the choice is so much a reality in the JavaScript world today that it's almost a joke. How many new things are coming out, how many new SaaS platforms are being launched, what is going to be new this week, and do you feel outdated yet? Which is terrible. Don't ever feel outdated because new stuff is coming out. That's not, I'm sure we could all pick up anything. We don't have to be up to date with everything. And so one of our objectives within Nuxt is to take away the pain of adapting to new providers and SaaS platforms and anything else that you might have. So we try and provide abstractions, which we do, from everything based on where you can deploy Nuxt. So those are specific platforms, but we also support just generic Node or generic web worker or generic Lambda. Different bundlers, we even have Vite and Webpack support built into Nuxt with RSPack coming soon. Different testing frameworks, we have a built-in Nuxt test utils that you can use, which has different providers. And let's see, what else? Database support, we have something called DB0, which allows migrations, querying, integration with ORMs. We have an image module, which allows you to use any of those 20-plus image providers based on whichever you're using. So those providers will do things like transform images so that they can be loaded. The minimum image size needed can be loaded in your project, and so on. Now, I don't know if you look through that list and spot providers that you are using, but our aim is that users shouldn't have to pick where they're deploying or what provider they're using because of Nuxt. So all of these are built in, but you can also create your own custom version of any of these. So you can create your own custom deployment preset, your own custom image preset, etc., a key value store, etc. And the idea is we have a consistent interface that can be exposed, so you can actually access this anywhere. So to give an example, it's going to work. Yes. So to give an example, this is ELK, the project I mentioned. So in here we have, we are using this use storage layer, which is in here. And ELK is a client for Mastodon. And I'll just fire up a new window and get across somehow. And if we were to access this, this ELK dev server, there it is. Running locally. But people want to deploy it in different places. They want to have their own fork, and they might want to have a different place where they store their data. So we can just add a little if-else and configure different storage mounts. Now these mounts can be layered and nested like a Linux or Unix-based file system, and you can have different kinds of drivers. So you could use memory storage in development mode. We actually use a sort of file system-based in development mode. You could use Cloudflare or Vercel or anything else. So this bunch of code is the only provider-specific code we need to create in order to support deploying ELK with a backend that integrates with any of these providers. And we could really easily add more, as you can see. So that means that the interface doesn't change. And I think that should mean for users, so for example, if you're dropped into a new project, and it's a Nuxt project, it doesn't actually matter where that project has its KV store based, or which image provider it's using. It shouldn't make a difference to you as a developer, and I think that's one of the things that should improve velocity for devs in modern web development. We have over 90, and the idea is to add as many more as possible. So we depend on users who use them to create these presets and help us maintain them, because we're a community project. But the idea is you shouldn't have to worry about this. A second, extensible, not just agnostic, but extensible. So Nuxt allows deep integration at every point of the build process using a library called Hookable, which we developed for this purpose, which is used elsewhere now as well. So we allow a waiting on running custom hooks at lots of different points. We've worked with the Chrome DevTools team to ensure that you get beautiful logging no matter which hook is being run. In dev mode, we support all kinds of different task runners and strategies, and you can debug your hooks in development when you're creating it. So Nuxt, you can build quite a lot with Nuxt. This way. And you can package up the whole code that you create into what we call a Nuxt module. So this is one of the things I think that sets Nuxt apart. It means you can distribute that module either directly in your project through a private package or a GitHub repo, or publish it to NPM. We have tooling to build that, and we have a data set, which is, again, publicly accessible on GitHub and an API. And we also created, for Nuxt 3, an SDK. So for future versions of Nuxt, even major ones, your modules should continue to work in the same way as if you write an app for Android or iOS, you're writing against an SDK that ensures it will keep working on newer versions of the platform. And here's some data, which again, I've just pulled live. So we have got over 210 different modules. You can see them at nuxt.com modules. And hopefully there's something for the CMS or the auth library or the a script integration or whatever it might be that you're looking for. Oh, and I'll show you what that looks like again. So if you'll forgive me, I'll just create a new Nuxt project. So this is the experience of using module, of using Nuxt to hopefully abstract away a lot of the pain that you might normally feel. So I'm going to create a new Nuxt project, initialize the Git repo, open it up, and I'll run the dev server. The default Nuxt project is pretty minimal. And if I run that dev server, it has a sort of welcome screen to start with. And I'll just say, there we go. It's a bit small, and I'd like to style this with Tailwind. So I'm going to open up the Nuxt DevTools, which is actually running in line with my application. And it allows you to see a lot of your app. And I'm going to add a new module. So this queries that same API that I was talking about. And in this case, I'll add Tailwind CSS. So I can actually install that from the DevTools here. It's going to add the package to my dependencies, restart Nuxt. It's also going to change my config to add that module there. And that means that now I can start to style this, say, with Tailwind CSS. So something like that. Heavens, I don't even know what I'm doing. Lex, can you center a div? Yes, it turns out I can. So that's the kind of thing that you can get with the modules ecosystem. Or a new module that we released recently, Nuxt Fonts. You could do something like this. Nuxt Fonts allows you to have zero config. Oh, not strict style. I'm going to style this div. Oops. We'll make it font family Poppins. And we will. Okay. So it's read the font. It's pulled it from Google. It's downloaded it locally into my project so that when I deploy, I don't have a third-party link. It's added a preload link to the header, and it's generated some font metrics, so it will reduce the layout shift. You probably won't see it in dev mode, but in production, the layout shift between your browser's default font and this custom web font will be at a minimum level. So that's the kind of thing that we can do with Nuxt modules. And I think that kind of modular approach is the future. So it's the basis of things like Unix or Linux, the idea of small packages that work together and extend a common core. Nuxt is also composable. So this was a change that happened. By the way, are you with me so far? Just checking. Because I can totally dial back on because these things are interesting to me. But they might not necessarily be interesting to you. Can you just no judgment? Don't look at anyone else. If you're sort of more detail, less detail. More detail, raise your hand. Less detail, raise your hand. Okay, I've made a note, and we'll talk later. No, actually, we will talk later. You can come and ask me anything later. You can also message me on my website or Twitter or whatever. I would love to talk about any of this later. Composables. So one of the things with Vue 3 is that a lot of the reactivity logic of Vue went from being a single object syntax, where you would have a component and it would have a key called computed, and inside there it would have some methods that define computed properties. In Vue 3, the idea is you import a computed function and you call it, which might be familiar to you if you're using like React. You'd have it like use state, or Solid would have a create signal and so on. And all of these things basically allow you to import or opt into features that you want to use. And we've leaned hard into that with Nuxt 3, with Nitro, with H3 and the other frameworks that we've built for Nuxt. The idea is that we have all this functionality that you don't have to use, and if you don't use it, it's not part of your bundle. So a framework like Express, anyone here used Express? So it has things like, it modifies the res and rec objects from Node. So you've got like a .json method you can call to return JSON. Or you can access like other functions, but they're always going to be there. They're always going to be part of your build because of how it works. They're just there. So with Nuxt, we actually only pull them in when you need them, and we use something called unimport to give your editor the information that these are available to you, and mean you don't have to import them yourself when you use them. I mean, you can if you want, you can turn it off. if you prefer seeing the imports, but it allows us to have a very frictionless approach to pulling in new parts of the framework that if you don't need, will be out of your build. Oops. The whole thing, the reason why stuff like that, you might think, well, this is just DX. It just makes your life a little bit easier. What does this have to do with modern web development? How can this help an enterprise adopting Nuxt? And I think for me, a lot of it is about reducing cognitive load and unlocking the power of convention. Because the idea is when you parachute into a new project, you immediately know how things work, and you know how to be productive in it. So you don't have to figure out how to change things. We also ship some other things that allow you to do something similar. So for example, if I nip back to that elk project over here, and I again open the DevTools, you can access things like information on the routing in the app. Like see all the different pages that exist. And if you're a new dev and you're trying to figure out what's going on, this is quite useful. And you can actually just click to go between them. Actually, it won't work because I'm not logged in, but you can click to go between them and see some of the different features of the app. You can also access the selector here, like the component selector, and directly click onto individual elements within the page. And it will be able to open the file that matches that in your editor. So if you're parachuting into a new project, you don't have to figure out with searching the project where to load something. You can actually directly do it just from the running project. And there are a lot of other examples too. Again, we provide the magic, but we don't want to completely get rid of your ability to see what's going on. So for example, you can see what auto-importable composables are available to you here, for example. And you can actually even have a look at the composable, see the documentation on it, and directly click it to open in your editor to see what that function will do, for example. And obviously that works in your IDE as well, but sometimes it's easier to do it in the DevTools. And finally, layerable. So the idea is that you should be able to treat your Nuxt project and other Nuxt projects like building blocks that are part of a bigger whole. So you can separate your concerns if you're working in a kind of micro front ends kind of way, and you want to have different teams building different bits of a project. This is totally possible to do. So if we open that basic Nuxt app I made a few minutes ago, we could do something like this. I'm going to copy this Nuxt config, create a new version of it here. I've created a little layer. And what I'm going to do in this parent layer here, I'll get rid of everything. In the parent layer, I'm going to say that we're going to extend this child layer. And you can extend from an NPM package, from a directory, from a Git repository, or anything else. And that means, as if in a monorepo context, you could do the same kind of thing. So I could do something like pull this out and create a little component. Components welcome component. Paste it in there, and we'll say from a layer. That's about you. And then we're going to actually use that now in our parent. So we have got access to this welcome component, which our IDE knows about. It's coming in from this layer, and it's actually now being used in our parent project. So you could easily see how you could build a component library, how you could abstract different feature sets away into a layer, and you assemble those at build time into a final project. And I'm not showing this in a monorepo because it would be a little bit more complicated to configure in live coding, but that would totally be possible as well. So the idea would be, as much as possible, you can swap things in and out from your actual code base, from Nuxt itself, from the provider where you're deploying Nuxt, from the code that you're using. You can version bits of your application using layers, and you should be able to take full control of that at the end of the day. So that is a little bit about how we're trying to adopt and foster modern development practices with Nuxt. I should say another thing, which I haven't listed as specifically a modern development practice, is the whole concept of stability. So how we ensure stability with Nuxt. What we're trying as much as possible is to have some guardrails in place. So we have a stable release cycle, which is we release a patch every week or so, a minor release every month or so, a major release every year, and we're just coming up to version 4 in June. We test every release against downstream projects that depend on it using something called ecosystem CI that tells us if it's safe to release. And what we are able then to do is push out new features quite quickly, knowing that they're tested and won't break people's project, and allowing people to opt into them with things like a future or features namespace. And of course, the fact that we've built test utilities to allow people to test things themselves is part of our strategy there. For Nuxt 4, we're actually proactively creating PRs to the modules ecosystem. Another reason it's great to have a registry that opt in to forward and backward compatible changes. And if you are using Nuxt, or want to, and you build a library, maybe a view library or something like that, please feel free to open a PR to Ecosystem CI, and I'll check your library against new versions and ensure we don't break it. So, if you want to get involved, you really don't have to at all, by the way, but if you want to, if you think this seems cool and I'd like to help contribute in some way, then actually we'd love to have you. And that's not just true of Nuxt, but any project I'm involved with. Actually, open source maintainers, I'm not sure how many of us there are in the room, we love it when new people contribute. It's a part of the reason we do what we do. It's an amazing community, and meeting people in person that you've only talked to online, or you've seen their sort of GitHub avatar, it is one of the highlights of my life, honestly. It's one of the reasons I love coming to conferences and meeting and talking to people. So we've got some things that will help. So our docs are type safe, for example, so you can hover over variables and get little type hints. That's powered with Shiki and 2/, which one of our core team, Anthony Fu, has sort of revamped. So do check that out. We have a Discord server and GitHub, which are great places to come for help. You can always find me on Daniel Roe on Discord. And if you have contributed, you'll get like a little Discord badge if you go to nuxters.nuxt.com. And finally, one thing that I want to say very much is that if you in any way want to get involved in open source or want to get involved with Nuxt, but just in general, I would be delighted to talk to you about it. So I have an open diary which you can book, and we'll chat online. And particularly that is true if you look at the core team or the contributors to Nuxt and you think, I'm not sure I fit in. I'm not sure I'm exactly like them. Would I be welcome? And the answer, of course, is yes, you would be welcome. And I would really like to say that to you face to face. So please book a call. And I'm happy to answer any question I can or help you in any way I can. And yes, there are some other links to Nuxt style things if you want to check them out. It's been a real pleasure to talk about Nuxt and to talk about just some of the things that I think are important in modern web development and what we're trying to do and how we're trying to adopt those in Nuxt. I, by the way, really hope that you don't think I think we've arrived. These are things we're striving for. This is why we're striving for them. We won't get them right always. Let me know if we don't. If you try Nuxt out and you think, this could be better, I would like to hear from you. Please do message me. That would be great. We might, not sure, we might have time for questions. We do! It's your lucky day. No, maybe it's not. But you can start thinking of questions while Maria, are you going to come up or shall I just ask them? I will ask them. The power is mine. You don't know what that does. Okay. Does anyone have a question? Can I answer something?
Thanks ever so much for an amazing presentation. Can I just say, coming from a 5-day-old, we have always been massive, hardcore web thing. When I saw you just starting with the tools, just tapping the install tailwind, and it started working, and I was like, but that's not the question. I'll figure it out. I'll go to the docs. I was totally impressed. Question. Okay, you showed us something like 20 or 30 different providers in Nuxt, which is cool. But, like decision paralysis. So when I go, tonight, absolutely playing about it. And the very first thing I want to know is, from an open server, it's going to work beautifully, right? But where do I push it? What's your choice? a small blog, gets a little bit of the authentication, 30 or 40 articles, some images, what would be your choice? I don't know if you can answer like in a conference, but like, do you pick one of the big ones, or pick some of the big Cloudflare? Is there a better choice?
So one thing I should have said, by the way, is that wherever you do push it, Nuxt will detect where it is. So on Vercel or Netlify or Cloudflare, for example, it will realize it's being deployed in that environment and automatically enable the correct preset and output the correct files for that focus. So typically, you shouldn't have to configure it in any way. And in terms of which one is best, the answer is, I'll answer your question, but the answer is it depends on your needs. So there are two kinds of answers to that question. So I could say it depends on Nuxt, and that would be me failing at my job, because I think individual choice is the key thing here, because this is a free source, it's open source, it's the free software philosophy. You should be able to pick and choose what you want. We shouldn't be dictating that. The framework shouldn't be the limitation. So that the things that affect your choice should be your needs, everything from how big your team is, to what your budget is, to how much you care, like what the cost of your time. Do you want to administer a VPS yourself? Would you prefer not to? So those are the kind of questions that I would say you should think about. I think Vercel, Netlify, Cloudflare are excellent choices. If you just want to try it out, this isn't a team. A lot of the other factors don't come into play. Those three offer 0 config deployments, very minimal setup, and you'll be able to get going and see what it's like sort of instantly. So that's a good choice. And if you need to change to another provider, you should be able to do it without changing anything in Nuxt.
Awesome. Any more questions? Come on. We're having coffee right after this. You have one.
So just to say, Nuxt is obviously coming, and that is not where we're putting the exciting things. So that we adhere to semantic versioning. So patches are for fixes, minor releases are for new features. That's where the exciting stuff is. And major releases are for breaking changes, which we aim to make minimal and gentle as possible. So one of the changes Nuxt 4 will bring us is, for example, a more performant kind of data store, which is technically breaking, but is going to be better for almost everybody. The things I'm excited about, so I'm in progress of working on Nuxt multi-app support. So I showed layers, which were the idea of splitting a Nuxt app into different parts and then assembling them at build time. Nuxt multi-app is the idea of splitting an app into multiple parts and federating them. So allowing them to be deployed separately, but coexisting in one page or one domain, something like that. I'm pretty excited about that. There are also some performance improvements that I will personally love to see. So we, in Nuxt 2, had the concept of a cache. If you'd already built the app once and you needed to regenerate some pages, you would just be able to do that without rebuilding the whole app. And we have a work in progress on build cache support, which means that we should be able to avoid rebuilding your app when parts of it haven't changed. And that should also work across deployments on providers who support it. Places like Vercel or Cloudflare, for example, have a build cache, which is persisted between builds. And we can actually, if you've only, say, changed a markdown file that's part of your blog, we shouldn't need to rebuild your app. You should be able to get something like a couple of seconds to deploy. So that would be something I'm pretty excited about too. And I could point out more. I've got a really long list of things that I would love to work on. But those are two.
Great. Last question, anyone? No? So, yes? So, stand up.
So for me, one of the things that really inspired me is the idea, so I see open source as about giving. It's not transactional. It's not about sort of, I'm doing something and I want payment for it. It's about, I do this because I want to help. This is my gift to you. And I do that partly because other people have given to me. So it's very much, it's a gift ecosystem. And when something changes from transaction to gift, I think it really frees you up. Because what you do, it's totally up to you. It's unconstrained. No one is telling you what you should or shouldn't do. It's not work. There's no performance review. Nobody is going to say you did a bad job. What you're doing is you are giving something of your time and insight and doing that freely. And as a maintainer, that's how I see it. People are giving me gifts when they contribute. And that's what I'm doing. I give gifts when I try and help. That was my sort of personal inspiration. I think I would advise, if you want to get started, pick something, a project that you're using yourself, and find either a problem or a feature that you want. So a bug, for example, would be you are following, if you go home and you follow the docs and you try and make a Nuxt project and it doesn't work in some way, that's a bug in the docs because it wasn't clear enough to get you going. So you are one of the few people who can spot that bug because I already have created lots of Nuxt projects. So I'm not going to spot the bug. I'm not going to see it because I don't have that clean slate background. So you could, if you wanted to, give the gift of fixing that spot in the documentation. And just figuring out how to fork a repo and make a change might be quite a helpful thing. And I know I said you could book a chat. You can also just message me if you have any questions. Is this something that Nuxt would welcome? Is this a good PR to make? What do you think about this approach? How do you even create a fork on GitHub? I'm really happy to answer those kinds of questions if that's a barrier to contributing in any way.
Great presentation. Thank you so much, Daniel.